All right. Good morning. I still have 3 more minutes of morning this morning. How's everybody doing today? All right. Lots of enthusiasm. Actually, this is a lot of enthusiasm in the crowd. I appreciate it. You are here at the April 22nd version of Park Chats. This is actually our 1-year anniversary of putting on Park Chats, which is where we get all the nerds who live in the greater Hot Springs area to come out and talk to us. But Park Chats is a collaboration between Hot Springs National Park and the Garland County Library to have more in-depth programming about the national park, right? So if we're the oldest national park in the country, we've got a lot of stories. We've got to tell people about these stories. And so we want to have a venue in which we can talk to everyone. And this program is also made possible by the Friends of Hot Springs National Park, which is the philanthropic organization that can do a lot of sponsorships for Hot Springs. So shout out to the Garland County Library, or GCL as they are in all of my emails, and the Friends of Hot Springs National Park, or FHOSP as they are in my emails, and also HOSP, Hot Springs, or some people say HSNP, HNSNP. But these are community organizations, whether federal, state, or nonprofit, who are dedicated to preserving public lands. So we appreciate all of them. We appreciate you all for coming out time after time. Won't sing the song, but I definitely want to after that line. And today's presentation is going to bring together a couple of different themes that we have going on. We are in America's 250th birthday year, and so we are smack in the middle of Hot Springs National Park Week. We are holding lots of programs this week because it's our 194th birthday, which is proof positive that we are the oldest federally protected natural resource in the United States. And we know somebody else who would disagree, but we just have to reiterate it every time. Today is also Earth Day, and so there's going to be lots of celebrations and commemorations throughout the city. If you went outside, the GCL and the Urban Forestry Department and the Arkansas Ag is giving away trees, so I'm kind of jealous. So if there's still trees left at the end of this program, I guess you can take one. I can't promote that. It's not my event, but... And so to combine those different features here today, we want to look at the history of the United States around the time of the Declaration, right? So, and create this world of the Ouachita in the first generations of the American story. And so we're going to be talking about this region, late 1700s, early 1800s, with some of the earliest definitive recorded accounts that we have of this place. So in some sense, this is a historical reference point today because it will put us at sort of the founding era, but also because it's Earth Day, we're going to be talking about a bunch of exploratory records that we have from the Hunter and Dunbar expedition that gives us not only a historical account, but also a nature account. And the nature account matches us with today's theme of Earth Day. And so to be able to bridge those two gaps of both history and ecology, we have invited Dr. Andrew Milson. He is a historical geographer, and so the way that he sort of studies things as a historical geographer is how cultural lenses at different times shape the way that we look at the world, right? If you're big in construction, you look at the world through construction. If you are big in plants, you look at the world through people's gardens that you're judging very intensively as you drive by quickly. And so he's able to look at different periods of time to see how we've understood our place in the world. Dr. Milson did send me his own bio, but I'll read his bio and then I'll give my own little bio. So Dr. Andrew J. Milson is a professor of historical geography in the Department of History and Geography at the University of Texas at Arlington, which is right down the street from Six Flags. So if you've ever been to Six Flags, you just were skipping class, right, from Dr. Milson's class, where he teaches courses in human, historical, regional, and urban geography. In 2020, he was inducted into the UTA Academy of Distinguished Professors. He has published extensively in the field of geography education and twice received the Best Article Award from the Journal of Geography. His most recent research has focused on travel and exploration in 19th century North America. His 2019 book, Arkansas Travelers, was awarded the J.G. Ragsdale Award for Best Book in Arkansas History by the Arkansas Historical Association. And so I met Dr. Milson towards the end of that project for Arkansas Travelers. He was exploring all sorts of folks who were moving through this region, trying to understand what's now the state of Arkansas. And he is extremely well positioned to talk about the historical but also the ecological perspectives of European travelers who came to this area. So he's as well equipped as anybody to merge those two historical and ecological themes that we have threading together today. He's also very nice. And I called him and I was like, hey, Dr. Milson. He said, not Dr. Milson, my name is Andy. And so I said, Andy, would you like to speak for this presentation? He said, yes. He wasn't able to make it today in person, so we're doing a live stream, which means that instead of his face bobbing from side to side, you will actually see him stationary for the betterment of everybody's eye muscles. We also, again, at the end of our presentation, he's requested that we have these items laid out that show you how this region was mapped and tracked by those earliest explorations by the Hunter and Dunbar expedition that came to Hot Springs, 1804 and 1805. So without further ado.
All right, thank you very much, Kane. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for showing up here on a Wednesday noon time, everybody. So, Kane, we have what, 500 people or so in the room there? And
yes, yeah, 502.
What I was imagining was a big auditorium full of Hot Springs aficionados. So, great to see those of you in the room and those of you online. And thanks so much, Kane, for inviting me to do this, and to Paul for working this live stream magic. This is great. So I'd like to begin by kind of giving you a little bit of a sense for the context of this expedition and what's happening. And so here we have this nice tiny map of the Mississippi watershed. This is maybe what you had in your textbook when you were in elementary school that showed you how big the Louisiana Purchase was. But this map creates a really misleading mental map for us because this is based on our knowledge of the territory today. This is not what Thomas Jefferson's or Napoleon's mental map of the territory would have looked like. A map from 1802 actually gives us a better sense for the kind of geography that was understood at the time. And so I really like this map because this is so honest about how little is known about what's going on in the West. You can kind of see the line there of like, yeah, we got this idea that there's some mountains out there. We don't really know how big or wide they are and so forth. And so you can see just the extent of the lack of knowledge about this space. And so one of the challenges for Jefferson after the Louisiana Purchase was to map the courses and the sources of what they referred to as the Western rivers. So these were the rivers that drained off from the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains, and they knew, eventually flowed into the Mississippi River. So I'll show you those here in a second. And so there were government-sponsored expeditions. Jefferson was big on we need to get out there, both for science, but also for geopolitical reasons, stake our claim to the territory that the British and the Spanish are also wanting to stake territory to. We need to develop relationships with the native groups that live in this area, and so on. So everybody's heard of Lewis and Clark, and I'm being maybe a bit cheeky, as our British friends would say, by calling this the other Lewis and Clark. But this is really kind of an expedition that's in the shadows of Lewis and Clark because of the enormity of what Lewis and Clark accomplished. Most people don't learn anything about Dunbar and Hunter. And so, again, I'm exaggerating by referring to Dunbar and Hunter as the other Lewis and Clark. But I think this label is kind of helpful as a mental bookmark for us to kind of remind ourselves that Lewis and Clark were not the only government-sponsored expedition to explore the Louisiana Purchase. So first of all, this guy, William Dunbar, who was he? Well, he was a wealthy plantation owner. He was of Scottish descent and had moved to the Natchez, Mississippi area around the time of the American Revolution, slightly before. Um, and he was sort of, always blowing with whatever the political winds were, whether it was Spanish territory or French territory or American territory. He was about, becoming a wealthy plantation owner. So he developed a large, plantation and became known to Jefferson as kind of a man of science and somebody who was a big deal in the region. So Jefferson and Dunbar corresponded over the years, and in 1804, in one of his letters to Dunbar, Jefferson mentions the possibility of an expedition to explore the Red River in the Arkansas. And so Jefferson's words were, Congress will probably authorize me to explore the greater waters on the western side of the Mississippi and Missouri to their sources. In this case, I should propose to send one party up the Penny River, which is now called the Platte, to its source, another party up the Arkansas to its source, thence along the highlands to the source of the Red River, and down that to its mouth. As you live so near to the point of departure of the lowest expedition, and possess and can acquire so much better the information which may direct that to the best advantage, I have thought, if Congress should authorize the enterprise, to propose to you the unprofitable trouble of directing it. So this is Jefferson's first little, hint that maybe he'd like to have Dunbar lead this expedition. So just to get your mental map of the geography straight, of course, the expedition that Lewis and Clark set out on was up the Missouri River, the portage here. They made it over to the Columbia and all the way to the Pacific. So that's an outstanding feat. They managed to succeed in that super long journey. What Jefferson was proposing to Dunbar was to ascend the Arkansas River. And again, they have no idea how far this goes. And so it's like, well, just keep going until you get to its source. And then, do an overland portage to wherever the Red River begins, and then come back down the Red River to the Mississippi. So let's see sort of where that goes. So again, this map, though, can be misleading because it's based on what we know now. And so this is the mental map of, okay, we know where the Arkansas River starts up in Colorado, and we know where the Red River begins. But at that time, they didn't. And so this map here from Delisle from 1783, right in the Revolutionary era, gives a better sense for kind of how at least the French at the time were thinking about this territory and the claims at the time. So here, if we zoom into that area that I had highlighted in red, we can see what's now Arkansas. And so they've got this idea that, the Arkansas River starts over here somewhere. This would probably be Oklahoma or Tulsa, somewhere like that. Here's the Red River. We don't really know exactly where it goes. You can see they've got them, a bit too close together. But you can see the other thing on this map are les Osages, or the Osage. And so this yellow line sort of denotes the territory that's considered Spanish territory at the time. So this map gives us a bit of a clue about why this expedition, two of the reasons is that the expedition did not go where it was intended to go. One was that the Spanish were not at all amenable to having Americans travel through what they considered to be their territory. And so the delicate diplomacy of this was for Jefferson and others to say, it's just for science, we're just like Star Trek, we're just scientific explorers, we're not doing anything, shady here. But the Osage were another group. We're like, we're not, we don't want white people coming in. We don't want anybody coming in, even the Cherokee, anybody coming into our territory. And so both groups would have violently resisted an American expedition going through this area. The other problem is something that we, can relate to today. Congress simply didn't fund it. They provided, $5,000 or something, which was just a fraction of what Dunbar said would be necessary to do this right. And in many ways, it's really fortunate that they didn't do this because they severely underestimated the lengths of these rivers. They had this idea that these Western rivers all kind of started from some high point in the Rockies. And so therefore, the portage from one source to another wouldn't be very far. They were kind of trying to take what they knew about the Appalachian Mountains and then paste that onto the Rockies. And so the Rockies are so incredibly different. The distance between those two rivers is very difficult territory. The Comanche and Apache live in that area. They very likely would not have survived and come back. So there is some money dedicated to it. And so Jefferson writes Dunbar back and says, basically, hey, I've got a little bit of money. Go do whatever kind of floats your boat. Just to say, you can go do an expedition that sounds interesting to you or something that you would like to propose. And so Dunbar said, hey, I've heard about these boiling springs of the Ouachita up in, what we now call Arkansas. And so this was considered a scientific curiosity. He wants to go explore the territory, kind of get a sense for the French and Indian landscape in what's now northern Louisiana, southern Arkansas, central Arkansas, and investigate these springs. So this expedition, the little dash line kind of shows you where he started out in Natchez, went down the Mississippi River to the Red, ascended the Black River to where it comes together with the Ouachita in Louisiana, and then came up the Ouachita. So along the way, what's now Monroe, Louisiana, was called Fort Miro at the time. It was an old Spanish fort. And so he talks about both the cultural landscape, the people that they encounter, which are few and far between, particularly in Arkansas, and the natural landscape. And so that was really my interest, was kind of understanding how this travel literature discussed the physical and human geography of this place back at this time and added to our geographical knowledge. So the expedition occurred from October of 1804 to January of 1805, and they spent most of the month of December at the hot springs. And so I believe Kate has this map for those of you who are in person, the map that was commissioned by for Nicholas King to create a map of the Ouachita expedition that includes some little notes about the journals of Dunbar and also the chemist who was on the trip named George Hunter. And so I kind of refer to it as the Dunbar Hunter expedition because Hunter was the other important person who wrote a diary and recorded a lot of the scientific information about the expedition. This map is oriented in a weird way because north is that way. So if we kind of flip it up to north and then zoom into the section around hot springs, you can see, spelling it the Ouachita, which actually would help those of us speaking English to pronounce the name correctly. And then you can see some of the territory and so forth that they explored. And so I'd like to give you a sense for kind of what Dunbar and Hunter discovered as they arrived at Hot Springs, what that space was like, what this world of the Ouachita was like for Dunbar and Hunter. So I'd like to read just a couple of excerpts from my book to kind of give you a sense for what they had to say and kind of how I describe it. So on December 6th, 1804, the expedition arrived at a landing near present-day Spencer Bay and Price, Arkansas. Blasier, who was their pilot, recommended that they stop here and transport their equipment overland about 9 miles to the site of the hot springs. Dunbar was pleased with the, quote, tolerably level land upon which they encamped, along with the, quote, good black, dark brown, and blackish soil, and, quote, the large and handsome timber and the flowers and evergreen vines. Despite the aggravations posed by the rapids, which are the chutes and so forth before that, and a lot of the rapids and gravel bases that they traveled up along the Ouachita, Dunbar made regular reference along their ascent to the scenic beauty and the quality of the land in central Arkansas. Just prior to their arrival at the chutes, he waxed poetic about the natural landscape. Quote, this promontory presented some appearance at a distance of the ancient ruined fortifications and castles so frequent in Europe. The effect was greatly heightened by a flock of swans, which had taken their stations under the walls, which rose out of the water. As we approached, the birds floated about majestically upon the glassy surface, and in tremulous melancholy accents seemed to consult each other upon measures of safety. The ensemble produced a truly sublime picture. So further upstream, Dunbar again envisioned American settlement in the area, as he noted, quote, a high rocky hill crowned with beautiful pine woods that he deemed, quote, a fine situation for building. It appeared from their vantage point that all the nearby lands, quote, lie very handsomely for cultivation. Even the heavens appeared more radiant. Dunbar remarked that the stars in the Arkansas sky, quote, shone with uncommon luster. The perceived quality of the land was matched by the quantity of wildlife in the area. They heard wolves howling in the night. They shot and ate the abundant wild turkeys almost every day. The numerous deer assured that there was plenty of venison to eat as well. They also encountered buffalo and learned the difficulty of killing one. At least 3 Arkansas buffalo were shot and wounded by the men of the expedition, but their attempts to catch up with their prey by following the tracks and the trail of blood were in vain. The day after their arrival at the base camp, Dunbar sent his pilot and most of the men on the 9-mile hike to the hot springs. They carried their baggage and some of the provisions and were to return the next morning with a report. Despite temperatures that had dropped to the teens and 20s, the men returned the next day in high spirits, with, quote, each giving his own account of the wonderful things he had seen. Some of the men had tasted the water and compared it to spicewood tea. Others talked about how hot the water was as it discharged from the rock. The group had also discovered a cabin and a few sheds at the site. The men were sent back to the hot springs after lunch with another load of equipment and directions to return the next morning. The following day, Dunbar and Hunter joined the men on the 3rd portage to the hot springs. When they arrived at the hot springs, they found a cabin about 12 feet square with no chimney and a few huts that had been built for the use during the summer for, quote, persons resorting to the springs for the recovery of their health. They were eager to feel and drink the water from the hot spring. Dunbar and Hunter failed to notice any special taste or, quote, cathartic properties in the water, despite what some of the men appeared to believe. On their first day at the hot springs, Hunter and Dunbar explored the immediate area and found 6 springs issuing from the surrounding rocks. They recorded that the highest temperature reading was approximately 148 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Hunter and Dunbar were reduced to speculation, though, about the cause of the heated water, and admitted that the answer to this important question, quote, will require some reflection and perhaps a knowledge of more facts than we are at present possessed of. So short excursions were also launched to explore the surrounding environmental landscape. One of the first orders of business was to climb the surrounding hills, and the hikes up present-day West Mountain and Hot Springs Mountain yielded estimates of the height of the peaks, observations of the rocks, soil, and vegetation, water temperature samples, and a view of the valley and distant hills. The men collected a variety of samples for additional analysis of the water, and Dunbar concluded that the hot springs were ripe for future scientific study. The prospects for commercial and agricultural development of the area were also chronicled. Both men were impressed by the, quote, great deal of excellent black vegetable earth in the area. Dunbar imagined vineyards producing Arkansas wine. Quote, nature has bestowed a soil which will reward the future labors of the industrious vigneron. Nature herself, indeed, unaided by man, has already planted on them 3 or 4 species of vines, which are said to produce annually an exuberance of excellent grapes. He found what he's supposed to be a wild species of cabbage, predicted that wheat would grow well in the area, and collected samples of native plants that he was told had medicinal qualities, quote, in hopes of procuring in due time seeds from which the curious may be furnished. Similarly, Hunter advised that cement could be manufactured from the limestone deposits, and that bituminous oil was evident in the water high on one of the hills. But the most creative moment of commercial fantasy came from Dunbar as the party endured below freezing temperatures and a blanket of snow on the ground. Dunbar noticed that a patch of ground where the plants remained green and the snow appeared to melt on contact. In the midst of his intrigue, he envisioned, quote, what a fine situation for a green or hothouse, where at small expense all the tropical fruits may be propagated. In his optimism, Dunbar imagined a productive commercial landscape in place despite the miserable weather. The only break for the soldiers during the 3 weeks at camp at the hot springs was Christmas. Dunbar agreed to, quote, indulge the men with a holy day, for which purpose they had hoarded up their ration of whiskey to be expended on this day. Hunter described the celebration that ensued for the weary men. They had made a reserve of their liquor for the occasion, which, and a saddle of venison they made, with a saddle of venison, they made themselves very merry, dancing, hooping in the Indian manner, and singing alternately, not forgetting to serenade us from time to time with a volley from their rifle, wishing us a happy Christmas with all the compliments of the season. The night came at length with the heavy rain, which put a period to their mirth, and sleep closed the joys for their day. So that gives you a sense of kind of some of the expedition, some of what I'm interested in writing about, and you can read if you decide to. And so I'd like to read just what Dunbar had to say at the end of the expedition when he got back to Natchez and was preparing his manuscript and his report to Congress. He sent a quick letter to Thomas Jefferson in February of 1805. So it's about roughly a month or a few weeks after he got back. He said, I have the satisfaction to inform you that Dr. Hunter and myself are just returned from the Ouachita. Time does not permit the preparation of a short report of our researches before the departure of this mail. The objects which have presented themselves to us are not of very high importance. It must, however, be acknowledged that the hot springs are indeed a great natural curiosity. So it's kind of interesting that Dunbar, and I don't think it was just false modesty. They didn't find the kinds of, things that they were sort of hoping, gigantic reserves of coal or something like that, or landscapes that would have been super commercially viable immediately. But much of it was a combination of science, but also science for the purpose of commerce, imagining the American future that was to come pretty quickly as Americans moved into this area, began to build roads and build communities. And so, some of it was, what's this landscape going to be like? What kind of commercial possibilities are there? And so he saw hot springs really more as a scientific thing to be studied than a place that, boded well for the future, other than maybe having hot houses to grow tropical fruits in the winter. And so historians have kind of tended to also agree with Dunbar here and say, well, this was sort of a minor expedition. They, they went up and kind of tried out some of the methods of travel during this time. They, sort of helped to map the Ouachita. About a year later, a new expedition was launched by Thomas Freeman, where they did try to ascend the Red River, and they were going to go as far as they could. And by the time they got to the Wichita villages now in the along the Red River, at the current day border of Arkansas and current day border of Oklahoma and Texas, they were stopped by a Spanish, military outfit that said basically, you're not going any further. And so that expedition didn't go very far. Pike is the one you may be more familiar with. He did make it across, going out from, across Kansas to Colorado, and then conveniently got captured by the Spanish and taken on a tour of New Mexico and Chihuahua and Texas. So there's more known kind of about Pike's expedition, even though it was also in some ways a bit of a failure. So all of this was in the big combo of geopolitics, science, cartography, gathering geographical knowledge, and so forth. And the thing that I find particularly interesting is the way that their environmental perceptions tend to lend themselves toward commercial applications. How can we use this material for advancing commerce? What can be extracted and sold? How likely is it that people can move here and become farmers? And then just sort of the sense of inevitability that eventually this place will be settled by Americans. And so we're just sort of laying the groundwork of what's possible in this space, while also staking claims, doing a bit of conquest by cartography. If you map it, you own it. Kind of attitude toward the Spanish, and honestly, what the Spanish considered a buffer zone. The Arklatex area was not of interest to them for settlement, but they just didn't want the French or the Americans to get too close to the territories that they really cared about. So in my book, I talk about Dunbar and Hunter, Henry Rowe Schoolcraft's expedition of through the Ozarks in 1818, 1819, Thomas Nuttall's expedition up the Arkansas River into Oklahoma. And he was a botanist, so he was very interested and there's lots in that chapter about the botany heading all the way up the Arkansas River from Arkansas Post to Fort Smith. And then the final chapter is about George Finshaw, who, of course, came kind of down what's now the Southwest Trail, or from the boot heel of Missouri, from a northeast to southwest trajectory, and came down to the Red River and crossed over into Texas. So I look at the environmental and the cultural landscape. So I'm going to stop there and see what kinds of questions you have and discussion you'd like to have about this.
So we're going to get crowd questions. And so to make sure that I relay those to Dr. Milson, you'll save them. I will then repeat them. So you'll all do the question twice. But I do want to ask prior, so Dunbar says, it's not like the greatest thing, but it's kind of cool. Did he inspire any further scientific inquiries into hot springs? Did these three other fellows that you mentioned, did they have any reflection on the Hunter and Dunbar expedition when they came into Arkansas?
I didn't find anything like that. And, I think it was one of those things that he just sort of left out there as a footnote that, hey, this is something future scientists could explore. But he didn't live very much longer after this, and I don't really know how much. He didn't seem to get much credit from the earlier or from the later people who came through here as being the first who had come here. Fenshaw was the only one who also visited Hot Springs. And by then, it had developed more. There were more cabins. It was, becoming a tourist destination. And so just in the 30 years, of course, in that period, Arkansas became a territory. Arkansas then became a state around the time that Fenshaw was coming through. And so the population had increased. And so it had become more familiar to what perhaps people see in Hot Springs today than certainly what Dunbar and Hunter would have encountered.
And we do want to say that if he died shortly after his expedition, it was not from a lack of drinking the water.
That's right.
All right, let's get what you got. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if the hunter Dunbar made other observations about birds other than that passage where in your book about the swans, and about the turkeys.
Yeah, they were regularly recording what kinds of species they encountered. There's one place, if you look closely on the King map, where they talk about alligators in Louisiana, being we didn't see them any further than here. I can't recall off the top of my head which sorts of bird species they mentioned, but they're certainly in tune to all of those kind of natural conditions. Fenshaw talks about there being all these canaries and so forth up in sort of northeast Arkansas that were squawking and flying over to the point that it was scaring his horse. And so Schoolcraft talks a lot about that in the Ozarks, all of the various species that, now we don't see. So.
A follow-up question.
Yeah.
Where could a person find those notes about the biology and the flora and the fauna of this expedition?
Yeah, so you can read George Hunter. His journal is freely available. If you just search Google for it, you can find a typed up version of his manuscript, and then several years ago, Brian Berry, is that, I'm getting his name wrong. Anyway, somebody published a version of Dunbar's expedition in Arkansas. And so that has the entire journal available. I think that's also Arkansas Press. Kane, can you help me remember what?
It's Trey Berry. It's called the Forgotten Edition. And so if you were to read both of his chapter and then Trey Berry, you get to be an expert for life.
Yeah, and there's a longer. So he also, he had to make a report to Congress and to Jefferson, and so he sent a longer report that included all of his readings of latitude and longitude, the temperature of the day. They were testing the water all the way along the way, looking for saline springs, and so that one's a little bit more of a dry read but if you're interested in the scientific data and all of that, that you can also find through, searching. It's available out there.
You know Theo Witzel?
Yes.
Yeah, I know he's done a presentation but he's a botanist and he does biogeography. But he's got a program that's primarily biogeography and botany.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, in your research and your travels, did you go, there's a state park in Arkansas, I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it shows you this Dunbar, there's a walk, what do you call it, boardwalk and everything through it, and it takes you through the swampland where you see alligators and all that stuff, and it indicates that that's the marker where all of the plats for the western United States
Hmm.
come from that, all the survey plats. Have you seen that, or do you?
Is that at Arkansas Post?
No, it's the Louisiana Purchase State Park. That's a little bit
Oh,
more.
okay. No, I haven't been there. Yeah, so doing the township and range surveys, the fifth meridian, I think one of the main meridians runs right through kind of
Yes.
eastern Arkansas. Sound right, King?
Yes, the fifth.
Okay. So yeah, there's that was one of the things I thought about including in the book, and I just couldn't find enough to sort of make a story out of it. Just kind of what I tried to do in this was tell the story of where they went, what they saw, how that affected their perceptions, and also just take them on their face. I mean, we can criticize them and say, oh, wow, they said these things that were kind of, culturally insensitive. But, I think, and some people kind of interpret these journals as being a way to see, well, what was Arkansas society like back then? And I'd rather us say, this says much more about the travelers themselves than it does the people they encounter, because they were coming with all kinds of biases, class biases, national biases, since, three of them are from England. They're looking down on the yokels in America. And so some of that, sense of who Arkansasiers were at the time is something I try to kind of break apart, and also point out the times when they say, these people really helped us out, and if it hadn't been for them, we would not have made it. So
Yeah, if you want to be historically accurate when you come to Hot Springs National Park, you should speak with your best Scottish Scottish brogue. Two from this side. Do I have a hand up on the other side?
Can I ask another
Oh,
question?
yeah.
Do we know the exact location of where the party stayed on the Ouachita when the others came, and where would that be in our local geography?
yeah, so I used I mapped on Google Earth all of every time I could find a more precise, where this river comes together, or this stream, or the discussion, I zoomed in and mapped it all. When they get to Hot Springs, it's a little harder to figure out, and they don't record all of the latitude and longitude is not precise enough to figure out precisely where their camp was. But I've got maps in the book that sort of show about where they were. It's mostly like when they're on the river, it's a little easier. Once they get to Hot Springs, it's more complicated. But yeah, we got the general gist of kind of where they were, and which, and I tried to figure out current day names for things like West Mountain and Hot Springs Mountain and so forth that they were going up.
When Dr. Milson mentioned Spencer Bay, that's sort of like at the north end of Lake Catherine. When you are driving to Mr. Whiskers, the catfish, and 270, the bypass comes in and you're over by Lakeside, that extension of Gopher Creek is now a golf course in a small neighborhood. That's the Spencer Bay area, is that correct? In the vicinity of Mr. Whiskers.
And I think, Kane, you said the chutes are down around Malvern now?
Yeah, at Rockworks.
Yeah. And for a while they were paralleling what's, now I-30. So Arkadelphia up to, I guess Malvern, and then up from there. So, yeah, it's again easier when they were on the river, but of course rivers have changed courses and that sort of thing too. So it's as precise as I can be geographically about where they were.
One other question, and I'll quit asking.
I appreciate it.
I recently read Nuttall's book about the Arkansas Territory, and when I read it, it sounded like he really didn't come to Hot Springs, but that he talks about Hot Springs. Was he?
Yeah.
Was he trying to make people think he was more widely traveled than he was? Or was that typical of Nuttall's methodology?
I think he was, so yeah, when, he came up the Arkansas, he went through what's now Little Rock, which was then, kind of a small little community. He went up Pinnacle Mountain, all of that. Yeah, so he didn't make a little side sojourn to Hot Springs. His mention of it is probably just a way of saying, oh, by the way, there's also something of interest kind of down, or this is what I'm hearing about, from the people who live in the area. So he's probably reporting secondhand information that he's getting from people that he encounters along the way. So
I've got a question.
Okay.
And this may be more of a question for Kane, but Andy, you mentioned that Dunbar and Hunter observed in the middle of winter time, there were green spaces close to the hot springs. Can you talk any more about the science behind that and what exactly the habitat has to be for there to be green spaces and surrounded by snowfall? I know we've seen some heavy snows that you may have seen firsthand the effect on the hot springs these last couple winters. So.
Yeah, Kane can probably answer that better than I can. My guess would be it's a matter of sort of where the springs are issuing and so forth. But Kane, you got a sense for what was going on there?
There's just a lot of, what's probably happening is a small trickle of water, of hot water that just doesn't have enough volume, but it's close to the surface, right? There's 47 springs, but they counted, 22-ish, a handful? Somewhere in the dozens, right? So they didn't even count all the official springs, and the number fluctuates over time, but different volumes of water appear in different times of the year. And so today we still see those non-snow spaces around the springs, but it's usually because our pipes are like right underneath the water. So we're trying to recreate natural springs using pipes.
Yeah. I mean, when they covered everything over, the idea of making a greenhouse is a really good one, but nobody evidently ever, because it ended up as being a health spa instead of, going with growing stuff. It was like people in the water and fighting over, we're going to charge people money to come soak in these things, but it wouldn't, the money was in the bathing and not growing stuff, so.
We did once have banana trees in front of the bathhouses, so that's perhaps our ode to tropical foods. Yes.
Is the book available on Libby?
Is the book available on Libby?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Good thing we're at the library, and we'll find out. While they're talking, speaking of botanical things, did they notice anything that lived in the water? And did they say anything about stuff living potentially in the water?
I don't think they were getting down to that. Yeah, to be, you mean like sort of microscopic things or just
or just the green stuff?
Yeah. Oh, there is one place where he talks about plants that are growing in the water, and that he pulls one up to sort of investigate. And he even says basically like, I know you're not going to believe me, but there were these plants growing in the hot water. Yeah, so he does talk about that a little bit.
We have a couple of physical copies of this book available in the library right now.
Great.
We don't necessarily have control over what goes on to Libby because that's a consortium of different libraries, but we can also put in a request to see if that can be an option too.
I know there is an electronic copy that that's available through Kindle, so I guess it's probably also Libby would be the library service for checking out a Kindle book, maybe. So Yeah, I think basically, yes, I think you can get a digital copy of it too.
Hey, they talk about birds and stuff, but what about bears? Did they mention bears?
Trying to remember, Dunbar and Hunter, probably not, but the other guys definitely do. Definitely up in the Ozarks. Schoolcraft and his buddy tried to kill a couple of them and just ended up scaring them away. So those guys were pretty hopeless. It's amazing they survived. So
Yeah, so if you just walk around in the Ozarks, just write a book about it. And then Dr. Milson will let you know how he feels about your survival ability.
yeah, I can judge them in retrospect. I call this Schoolcraft chapter the Greenhorn Expedition because they just completely, it's pretty amazing. So anyway, if you're familiar with that at all, it's a good story.
Oh, boy.
What's really remarkable is most of the guys, they're of British origin, most of those folks. So it turns out British people think Arkansas is fantastic, whatever it would be. Smashing. Yes.
Yeah, Schoolcraft was the only American of the group. He grew up in New York, in Vermont, but the other guys were all of English origin and Scottish origin. Yeah.
Now, I know some of y'all will have your questions in 23 hours, so just go back and time that. Yeah.
I understand that Dunbar's report to Congress was in what, like 1805 or 1806?
Right.
How long was it before that information was available to the general public?
Yeah, I think some of it they were careful about, mapping and so forth was a bit of a state secret, and so I think some of the information might have been publicly available. There might have been some sort of, I didn't find a lot of sort of newspaper stories about it. It was overshadowed very much by Lewis and Clark. By the time he got his report in, Lewis and Clark's, magnificent discoveries. And so, today it would end up getting buried in other stories that, were more fascinating or something, or more clickbaitish. And so, yeah, a lot of it would have been, it's like the official report was submitted to Congress, but because even Dunbar was saying, well, there's some interesting things, but we didn't find anything earth shattering. It probably didn't merit a lot of coverage or so it's only people like us today digging it up and saying, oh, wow, that's interesting. I want to read it. That maybe Dunbar is somewhere smiling about the fact that we even care now. So,
Well, James Audubon knew about it by 1820.
okay, yeah.
That'd have been pretty quick, wouldn't it, for general information?
Yeah, and so some of it too had been the American Philosophical Society collected a lot of this kind of information, and so those who were interested, that were members of that, could have been getting reports about things that the general public may not have been as interested in. But people like Audubon, Frederick Law Olmsted, and the later expeditions would have recognized that Dunbar was the first to go up the Ouachita and to visit the hot springs before it became the hot springs.
If you're enough of a nerd to go to speaker series in the greater Hot Springs area with your local club, you probably would have searched out these reports, whereas the rest of us would have just waited for you to tell us the good stuff.
Right.
Well, Dr. Milson, no, you just inspired Paul's question.
Yeah, well, sort of. Did these early explorers, did they immediately know that this was, I mean, people to this day sometimes think it's a volcano, but causing the waters to be hot, but did they immediately know they were of geothermal origin in some way? Or did they think there must be a river or something connecting underground? We have to go find a source far away.
Yeah, they speculated on it. I skipped that part in the book, but they did write about their theories. And so the idea of there being some kind of underground cauldron that was heating the water, they were on the right track. It's geothermal and it's based on the fault and those kinds of things. They just didn't understand the geology of it. And geology kind of was really nascent at the time. And so Fenshaw was a geologist, and so he was interested in it geologically, but the exact understanding of the faults and all that, like Dunbar said, was going to have to come from somebody who has more information and and scientific knowledge than they possessed at the time. But they had lots of theories about boiling water underneath the surface that was coming out somehow. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Milson, this is a fantastically appropriate historical and ecological view of the Hot Springs region, the world of the Ouachita around the time of the founding. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate your And his book is available in person here, potentially digitally, or with your very own copy via however he has made it available. So,
Great, thanks. And feel free to reach out to me by email if another question comes up and you're interested. I'll do my best to answer it.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, thanks everybody.
What's the May program?
The May program is our next park chats will be the 4th Wednesday of next month, and it will shift from historical hot springs into what hot springs has provided for the nation. We will have Dr. Elliot Bowen, who has one of the only full-length academic nerd books about Hot Springs National Park as it emerged as a giant national hospital. Yeah, you can go to it if you like. And remember, we have the printed map that Dr. Milson had shown on his presentation. We have the vascular if you went to the Garland County Historical Society presentation yesterday.